it's a big ocean. You know, once we have the submarine, it's great to track it. But there's a point that we need to get there. We have to understand the life cycle of the navies that we're operating against. You know, where they're deploying, where they're moving back and forth to, which islands in the South Pacific that they're standing up, and how often they go back and forth to those islands. And then that goes into when we start getting spurious contacts, you know, for the ASW problem for submarines, we understand what those contacts mean in the grand scheme of things. So that's kind of where Triton connects to the ASW problem. And I think we as a community kind of uniquely understand that. So I will say too that, you know, so a lot of people want to know how big is this MQ-4C Triton that we're going to be flying. You see it here overlaid against a P8 and a P3, which if you're from Jacksonville or if you've just been around them, you've seen them before. Pretty big aircraft. And yet the Triton's wingspan, as Bob was talking about BAMs, it's the same wingspan as BAMs, which is 131 feet. It's not the drones that you see the kids flying around these days. In fact, with that long wingspan, it kind of in the shorter fuselage, it lends itself to our high altitude, long endurance flights. We fly over 50,000 feet and up to 24 hours for our missions. And we're very fuel efficient when we do so. We're burning about 400 pounds of gas an hour when we're up at altitude, which if you're familiar with P3 operations, you burn up to 10 times more than that, you know, in a given mission per hour. If you go next slide, please. So one of the differences with manned aviation is just, you know, how long we fly and how efficient we are while we're flying. But another big difference is the diverse distributed infrastructure that's required to fly Triton versus our manned brethren. We have the Triton aircraft as one part of the system you see there on the right. Plus we have the main operating base, which is where the majority of our aircrew will operate the aircraft. The forward operating base, which is co-located with the aircraft, and is where our forward deployed pilots control takeoff and landing. And finally, the command and control networks that run through satellites. It's a complicated system, but as you can see in the italicized fine print, we're still using the same intelligence teams, the same tactical operations teams, and the same maintainers that operate daily on manned aircraft. So it's not like we're using folks that are unfamiliar with the fight that we do every day in deployed areas. And they're going all over the world too. They're going to be deploying not just out of here, but our first deployment, in fact, will be in Guam. So it's just a slight detour from what we're used to in manned aviation. Go next, please. So our community is the Maritime Patrol and Reconnaissance Aviation Community, MPRA. And we've moved into a family of systems concept that takes 3 legacy platforms that you see on the left and combines their capability and capacity into 2 brand new aircraft. Go next, please. Triton capabilities are coming in 2 phases, baseline and multi-in. And what you're seeing on this slide is baseline Triton, which is what we'll have for the next 2 years and is designed to provide a recognized maritime picture, primarily via radar and secondarily via electro-optical camera, electronic support measures, and automatic identification of emergency ships. This is the plane we'll fly out of Guam as early as next year. Not pictured here, though, is the follow-on multi-in aircraft, which will have all the same capabilities as baseline, but with added signals intelligence collection and takeover for EP3 as that platform goes away in a few years. Multi-in is ultimately the reason for this program, the reason Congress gave us all this money to buy Triton, and the end state of this half of the family of systems. In the meantime, though, we still have to prove we can take off and land and do the basic maritime surface search mission out of Guam. And that's our charge right now, and we are singularly focused on making that happen. Go next, please. All of Triton's capabilities come together to deliver strategic persistence and tactical response. Our capacity is unmatched in maritime patrol, as we're able to cover up to thousands of square miles and detect and track thousands of targets. To put that in context, in about 4 years, we'll be taking off out of Mayport. When we take off out of Mayport, we can start tracking surface contacts going in and out of Charleston immediately. We don't have to fly north, we can get Charleston right away. We have the breadth of this aircraft is is also unbelievable. When I say thousands of targets, there was a test mission that was flown out of Pax River a couple of years ago, and they were tracking targets going all the way up the Hudson River and all the way down here in Jacksonville. You know, and maintaining track on all of this. I've flown a number of missions out of Pax River recently, and the automatic identification system that I talked about pulls in tracks, you know, by the dozens in seconds. It is pretty fascinating that way. It's also going to solve the tyranny of distance problem, as you may have heard that term described in the Pacific. The Pacific has thousands of square miles to cover of surface area, just basic tracking. And that pattern of life of the adversary is only able to be tracked if we have a persistent platform that is out there continuously understanding what the adversary is doing on a daily basis, on a weekly, on a monthly basis. And then the tactical response aspect. You see here the P3 and the P8 at a lower altitude. Those are our pinpoint guys to go find specific targets and do something about those specific targets. So, like I said, we're not taking the ASW mission, but we're providing, we're almost like the offensive lineman. We're providing bigger holes for the ASW mission to run through. Go next, please. You may be wondering what it's like to fly an unmanned aircraft, and I know a couple people already asked me so far. It's certainly not your grandson or your son or your anyone you know who has a remote control set out in their backyard flying it with a radio signal that only goes a few yards. It is certainly going through these satellite command and control networks that cover, in our case, thousands of miles. But the monkey skills, as we always like to refer to what the pilots do, the monkey skills aren't really there. You're moving a mouse, you're telling the aircraft, go fly here, and the aircraft has enough computerized memory and understanding to just go fly and move the ailerons and move adjust the engine output and go fly up there. And the picture you're looking at is representative of the mission control station, or as we call it, the box. All the mission crew operate from here at desks with computers. Our operators have more connectivity and workspace than they've ever had before in the aircraft. And it's not quite the same as the P3 I grew up in, but it is what we're going to be doing for the next several years. The other variation that you are not seeing here, sorry, yeah, you can keep that up. We're starting off here in Jacksonville. We're going to deploy first to Anderson Air Force Base in Guam. That is our first deployment. Down the road, there will be multiple orbits all over the world. But it's still going to be flown from Jacksonville and from Whidbey Island, which will be the next site. Imagine, if you will, that one of our pilots or one of our operators, whatever else, wakes up one day and drives into work, flies a mission out of Fifth Fleet, goes home that night, comes in the next morning and flies a mission out of the Med. And all they've done that whole time is just go back and forth from home. That's kind of the mindset that we're getting into. And you're familiar with that from reading about it from the Air Force side of the house. But the Air Force doesn't have, their operators don't exactly switch between theaters on a routine basis the way that we're going to be required to do so. So there's a little bit more agile thinking that's required. What I'm showing you can go next one. What I'm showing you right here is how that whole unmanned aerial system, the way we think of it, the UAS, how it all fits together. So on the bottom right, you have that same mission control station that I showed you before, and then next to that, the launch and recovery element. That's a computerized depiction of our hangar in Guam, which is pretty much finished, and we'll be, like I said, deploying out of there next year. We will have pilots forward and maintainers forward who will be physically co-located with the aircraft, who will launch and recover and maintain it from that launch and recovery position. And then the aircraft itself. Those three things compose the UAS. On the left-hand side, we have the maintenance home base and leadership and operations hub. Leadership and operations here is at Jacksonville, at NAS Jacksonville, and the maintenance home base is out at Naval Air Station Point Magoo, which is very challenging, by the way. We have 150 of our sailors that are in California on a daily basis. and it's still just an O5 squadron. So we travel quite a bit out there, and we have some really strong leadership out there locally. If you go next, please. Okay, now we're going to fast forward 8 years to 2025. And I said we're going to be worldwide at that point. We're going to have 5, the plan right now is we're going to have 5 orbits worldwide. One here that'll be flown out of Mayport, one in the Med, one in 5th Fleet. So those 3 would be under the VUP-19 of the future. And then on the West Coast, we'll have a new squadron, VUP-11, based out of Whidbey Island, with their maintenance also in Point Mugu. And they'll own 2 orbits. They'll own the one that's flown out of Point Mugu and the one flown out of Anderson Air Force Base in Guam. So out of those 5 orbits, continuous 24/7 presence, we're going to have over 800 people. And you might think to yourself, where are those 800 people coming from? They're all coming from the MPRA community for the aircrew, and from Naval Aviation for the maintainers and all the other support personnel. It's a zero-sum game. The way that it's zero-sum is that we are filling in when VQ starts sunning down. So VQ is the EP3 Ares, which you may be familiar with. That aircraft is not going to continue in perpetuity. That aircraft is sunning down around the 2020 timeframe, and Triton is going to take over that mission with the multi-in variation. And all those builds are going to become ours. Here's where we are today. So in the top left corner is the aircraft. That was taken last year here in Jacksonville, although you will not see the Triton fly out of NAS Jacksonville, only out of Mayport. That was a model that we had put together. But that is our VUP-19 operators and support personnel in Jacksonville with the aircraft there. Like I said, we're about 100 strong out of here, and then out in Point Mugu about 150. Those are all sea duty maintainers, and the operators here in Jacksonville are on shore duty. And I'll talk about the just Jacksonville and Mayport in a second. If there's no other questions, go next, please. So if you've been on NAS Jacksonville at all in the past couple of years, you've seen a ton of construction. If you drive down Yorktown right now, there's a giant building being constructed on the right-hand side as you're heading back toward the river. That building is going to be ours one day. That's where we're going to have the first multi-in mission control station will be out of that building. A few of the numbers there. The headquarters was an older building that we just repurposed, but the mission control station and for the 2 of them are combined close to $30 million that was put into what used to just be trees over there. And then the Triton training facility is about $3 million. So there was a lot of investment here in Jacksonville. And that is, like I said, that's where 3 worldwide orbits are going to be flown out of. So imagine, 3 deployment sites all kludged into one giant building. That's what we're going to have in the future. If you go next, please. Now at Mayport, so I have not been to this site yet, where we're building on a Mayport, but the contract was awarded this past summer, for a hangar. There's going to be some other ancillary buildings as well, a launch and recovery building. That combined contract is worth $42 million, and that's going to be some major construction on Mayport. The addition of personnel is going to be about 300 people, and that's all going to start happening around 2020 timeframe. So luckily, the aircraft are going to be moving in, the people are going to be moving in, but that's not leaps and bounds. We're not moving to like 1,000 people operating out of that hangar. It's just about 300. Okay. That was all I wanted to talk about myself, but certainly we had some questions. I'm open to any more. Yes, sir.
Can you address the time over target, and does the drone have the capability of refueling airborne?
So last question first, no refueling capability. We can operate 24 hours and some change. So an example is if we were to fly from Guam to the South Pacific, that's about a 7-hour transit, because we fly at about 300 knots all the time when we're up at altitude. That's about maybe a 6 or 7 hour transit. We can give about 12 hours on station if you do the math there, maybe a little bit less. So that's the time on target. But that's just when we have, for this initial deployment, we only have 2 aircraft that we can fly, so that it's not, it's just going to be out and backs. In the future, what's going to happen is you'll have multiple aircraft supporting one area. So one aircraft will go out and do 12 hours, maybe a little longer, like in Fifth Fleet. You're essentially on station in Fifth Fleet as soon as you take off. So that aircraft will then be relieved by another at a certain point to provide that continuous coverage. And those 2 aircraft will be able to turn over their common operational picture to each other. So you don't lose, because right now, you send out a P8 out of Okinawa, and that on-station ends, and the picture ends, stops building at that point. Our picture will be a continuous building picture, which will also not only be fed to those 2 aircraft, but also feed to Fleet Battle Watch floors via either Link 16 or Geeks. So they'll have a continuous build on